Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Girl Wow.
Oh, that's a new one. I like that.
Today, I have Kat, Karthika, Cleo, and Christina with me today. And today's focus will be addressing anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism. And I mean, let's just pause right here before you tell yourself, wait, I'm not racist. I don't need to listen to this. Let me just tell you with 100% confidence that if you think that way, then you're racist. We've discussed racism before, but with terrible audio, so it's not on the podcast. It's on the YouTube channel. I couldn't do that to anybody's ears. I guess we can talk about what anti-Black racism is and how it manifests if people are still confused about how the Black community experiences racism. I have some resources that we have gathered together. Alyssa Titer put together a really great breakdown of how anti-Black racism manifests. And it has a few different structures. So intrapersonally, internalized anti-Blackness because whiteness has been standardized. So in terms of colorism, there is internal bias towards lighter skin. Interpersonally, between individuals and groups, there's overt, covert, and micro aggressions that are racist. So overt could be using the N-word. Covert could be housing discrimination, and microaggression would be, wow, you speak so well for a Black person. And structurally, as in the laws and regulations of society, which is police brutality and many, many other ways, like defunding community resources and putting it towards capitalist systems and benefiting white people only. Kat and Cleo, when did you first realize that your skin color made you feel different?
Since I was a young child, like, as soon as I could talk and, like, understand things. Yeah.
You both grew up in very white neighborhoods, right?
Yeah. Growing up, my classrooms, I was either, like, the only Black person or, like, one of two or something. Mm-hmm. And I started swimming at a young age, like, competitively, and they were all white. And I didn't even remember this until recently, but, like, I would get made fun of and, like, excluded a lot because I was Black, and because, like, my mom made me wear a cap to swim with, because of my hair, but none of the other little white children did this, so they would, like, make fun of me and judge me for having to do that. So it would just be an uncomfortable space to walk into until one day the swimming coach was like, you guys have to take this seriously and wear, like, a swim cap because you're swimming and, like, your hair gets in the way. And then they started wearing swim caps, but I was, like, excluded and made fun of because of that beforehand.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a lot of experiences being younger and being the only Black person in all of the spaces I was in, except when I was with my family. So yeah, I wanted to be white really badly. Like, that's, like, what I aspired. I'm like, I want my hair to be straight. Yeah. I would, like, wear a towel over my head and pretend it was, like, long, luscious, straight hair.
That's fucked
because
up.
I wanted to be white. And even now, there are still remnants of that are still in my mind of just, wanting to achieve whiteness.
And that's, like, such a big thing, I think, especially for me because I'm, like, biracial, so my mom is white. So, like, being, like, going out into public with my mom was always, like, really weird for me, and, like, I hated it, and it kind of, like, drove me to a point where, like, I hated going out with my mom and stuff. So, like, that's, like, just an example of how deep it goes, I guess. Like, it, like, leads to, like, so much, like, hate within yourself, but also, like, towards other people in your family, and then, like, you're mad you can't, like, achieve this unattainable whiteness because you're never gonna attain it, no matter how much you like try to like assimilate into white culture. Like you're just becoming less true to yourself. And then like when I came to Toronto, and like Kat, and I'm sure even everyone here can attest to how like fucked up, like I said fucked up stuff still, and like I was pretty racist too, and it was just like a very like big process of unlearning all of that shit and realizing like the reason I was acting like that is because I was still trying to assimilate into like something that I don't want to be a part of. It's just like what you're taught how you should be. And like if you think about that, that's like me unlearning racial ideals and stuff till I'm like 27. So that's like a really long time to be like having to unlearn something so toxic. And then you think like, well, if like Black people could just like be, not even just Black people, like Indigenous people as well, like any kind of person of color culture could just be represented to begin with and not persecuted, like how much people could just like start to like appreciate and like just be themselves.
I felt like I had to compensate in so many other ways because I wasn't white. So I felt like I had to talk a certain way. I couldn't act out or be a certain way, because then I would be proving to everyone that Black people are exactly what they think they are. So I was always trying to fight that and be the opposite. Yeah, I put a lot of pressure on myself at a very young age to not be that. And that pressure has carried on throughout my life. And even now, like, it's something that I fight with all the time because of what I thought I had to be and what I still feel like I have to be. Being surrounded by white people and being in a white space, you're trying to belong also. So you're doing things to try to belong and also to prove them wrong and to live up to all of these expectations. And it's just like, it's so much pressure.
But it's wild to me that you felt that from a young age. Like no child should have to carry that consciousness. It completely shapes you into something that, like, you don't even know who you are at the end of it, right? You're like, did I ever really get to experience and fully express myself to the way that I wanted to be, or did society shape me into somebody? And like, do I hate myself because I hate myself, or do I hate myself because society taught me to hate myself? Like,
it's such like a mix. It's like, it's so much nuance. It's like, like I'm trying to like be gentler to like who I was as a child, because like there are so many factors that are just out of your control. And like I feel like how I acted in those times was just me trying to survive to the best of my abilities in a situation that, like, I don't know, like, people, like, don't take as seriously, but, like, I don't know, no child should have to go through half of the shit that, like, children who aren't white have to go through. And I feel like white people are just always taught, because they're represented everywhere, like, they're allowed to feel the whole range of emotions and do anything they want. And it's just, like, you are always resigned to be represented as like their best friend or like the side character. You only experience one personality trait, one emotion. So I don't know. Yeah, it definitely like fucked me up growing up in like a small white town where, like Kat, I was either the only dark-skinned person in my class or like one of two.
Like my immigrant parents also, it's not like they taught me that it was okay to be in my skin and to be Black. We're all just trying to survive, and as immigrants they were trying to make it in this world, in Canada. So they weren't teaching me how to love myself. They also kind of perpetuated the fact that I needed to be a certain way and not act in certain ways. I needed to do really well in school and, talk properly and just not act like other Black kids. So, and they're Black.
Yeah.
So it's like this, and they internalize that also from society, because society has also told them that this is the way it needs to be for us to survive. So it's just this never-ending cycle. I mean, I hope it ends with me. But yeah, it sucks that even within your own culture, that they're also feeding you this information and telling you you have to be this way to make it.
Yeah. I think anti-Black within the Black community is manifested in that way, is through self-hate and through teaching your kids all this like I don't even know how to quantify the amount of emotional labor it must have taken for parents to have to teach their kids to be so aware of everything that they did, how they talked, how they dressed, how they interacted with other people. Like
it's the amount of that emotional labor and pressure on a kid growing up, and especially like you said, like when you're with your friends, like if certain kids could do some things but you couldn't do some things.
So have you guys talked to your parents about Black Lives Matter and all the stuff that's been going on?
My father is an immigrant, but I don't know, he was a bad dad, so there's not a lot that I get from that relationship, which then leads me to have my mom, who is white, and she doesn't say all lives matter anymore, but fuck, did we have to have that conversation like 2 years ago? So yeah.
It's weird that you had to educate your mom about your own experiences.
Well, I wrote a zine. Like, that's how I, like, get out of my problem. So, like, I wrote the zine, How Do I Tell My Mom I'm Black, to try to help her understand that. Because sometimes she would say to me, like, yeah, but, like, you have white in you, but, like, no one can fucking see that. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm just, like, this ambiguous identity that has a skin tone that's not white, no matter what. Like, if people don't think I'm Black, they either think I'm South Asian or something. Like, it's whatever. But, like, you don't see white when you look at me. I have light skin privilege, yes, but like I'm still not white. So I don't know. Having to explain that is exhausting to your mother.
It's not like you're talking to some stranger on the internet and you can just tap out and be like, I don't need to explain this to you. But it's like, it's your mom.
Yeah.
It's your mom, so like she has to
get
it.
And Kat, you haven't talked to your family?
No. So again, like, I also have a weird relationship with my family. But that's generally just something we don't talk about, really, which probably makes everything a little more difficult, because it would be nice to have, like, the closest people, like, the people who birthed you and who are also Black and who obviously have had their own experiences. It would be nice to hear about that and talk about that. But again, I think it goes back to them just trying to survive. Like, we all just get it. We're Black. We know we're experiencing it every day.
Yeah.
So I think that's just where it comes from. We're all just, we get it. Yeah. So we just don't talk about it. But it would be nice to talk about.
Yeah.
I talked to my brother a little bit, and he's only a few years older than me, so we're more like on the same level. And we did talk about it a bit, and it was sad, because it was kind of right after the George Floyd stuff was happening. And he started crying, and it like caught me off guard. Because again, my family and I don't really talk about this. But yeah, he started crying and he was like, that could be me. So, yeah. And that was really hard to hear. This time right now, it's really stirring up emotions and triggering everyone. Yep. Like, I wasn't expected I didn't expect to be triggered as much as I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the same with my brother, because I wasn't expecting that from him either, but I think we're all just going through it.
Well, especially if in the realm of social media, it's unfair and unnecessary for Black people to continuously see that happening, and then for, on the flip side, white people to watch that, say, oh, that's bad, but then not still do anything. And
or asked to be educated.
Or asked to be educated.
Yeah. And I know, Christina, you told me before, like, Christina's been very active on social media. Christina is never active on social media. Let's start with that first. Christina is very silent on social media, and she has been the most active in promoting good content. But I remember you told me, Christina, that this has been the least amount of engagement that you've gotten because of your white circle, right?
Yeah, so since I don't use social media a lot, I go and look at the views on my story, like who's looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say usually it's in the 50s or 60s, and lately I've been noticing it's like 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So like low 50s. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so a lot of people are watching, but then there's that chunk that's not, that maybe sees that and then goes, oh, this again. And they get to just flip it aside.
Yep.
And move on with their lives.
Isn't that nice?
Whereas Black people have to go through this every single day. Anytime they walk out of their house, anytime they engage with the media, like, so I feel like people should be, like, white people should be using their voice, even if, like I don't know what you're doing behind the scenes, that's fine, but for Blackout Tuesday, when I saw a whole bunch of people on my feed just post the black squares with nothing else. Yeah. Just the black square and a hashtag. No resources. This is how you can help. No donation links. No information about maybe the history of what's going on or what can be done.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of participate in that social media activity, I guess.
Have you had anybody speak up against you, Christina?
Well, I would like to say not super against me, but me and my sisters have been talking to my parents a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they have their rebuttals. Of course, they're not saying the whole movement is wrong, and they're not saying that there is no anti-Black racism or anything,
mm-hmm.
but they'll bring up small instances
mm-hmm.
of like, okay, but what about this? And what about this?
And then the people that say, well, I wish they wouldn't riot and I wish that they wouldn't loot. It's whataboutism. The whataboutism is hard.
But the beauty of that is all that looting, all that rioting, guess what still supports it? All the insurance companies that all the white people still have that will take care of all of their problems and give them back all of the money that they need.
Places like Target or whatever that get looted. Target got looted because they weren't providing milk and water for protesters who were being tear gassed by police. And like Kerr said, like the insurance companies, they're fine. They're gonna be fine, and those places don't even pay their workers. And those places, like, it's so systematic that the people who are working in those spaces don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to enough resources to pay their rent and buy food and just survive as people too. And also they're being forced to work at a grocery store during a global pandemic. Kat, I was wondering if you feel like a bad Black person during this, for how hard it is to I don't know, just be present or share resources. I at one point I feel like it's not our job, but the
it's
other
not.
point, but I feel like by not doing anything, I don't know, I feel like shit.
Yeah, it's been a lot because I've been battling with all of the feelings that have been triggered. So that's one thing. Also, it's a pandemic. That's another thing, and just general life stresses. And then now that there's this whole movement happening, which is great, I feel weird. Like I want to do stuff. I want to stay informed and I want to retain more knowledge. I should have gone to all the protests and, you know, I should be more active. I should be sharing all of these resources and doing these things. And I know it's not my responsibility, but I still feel bad about it because I do want to help and I want to help a change be made.
Same as you, Cleo? You also feel bad?
Yeah, I had to ask, like, my friend Terry when we were gonna do the fundraiser for Old Growth Press. I'm like, is this a stupid, it's so, like, ingrained, like, I was like, is doing this fundraiser, like, a stupid performative idea so people will think that our press gives a shit about Black people, despite the fact that I am a Black person running this press? There's so many circles you have to fucking jump through that you're like, is it am I? And it's just, like, psychologically, it's really fucked up. It's like you're gaslighting yourself.
Yeah.
Almost.
Which is... I'm surprised that you and Kat feel this way, feel guilty, and somehow feel like you're not contributing to anti-racism.
I think it goes back to, like, what Kat was saying about, like, we're always thinking 5 steps ahead, kind of on, like, how we can present ourselves or what we're doing or whatever. Right. So that I feel like it gets to the point where, like, it just gets into every little interaction. I know when I'm in all Black spaces, I'm like, I don't belong here, too. And, like, that's a big thing, too. It's just, like, this weird, when you're deprived of something for so long, and then you get to participate in it, you're just like, I don't belong here because I've never had this before. And it just feels so alien.
When you say, even in an all-Black space, you feel othered, can you expand more on that? What about it makes you feel different?
It's definitely, like, mainly me. It does depend on the situation. Like, you're like, I don't feel Black enough. Like, I don't know about Kat, but at least this is me. Especially me because I've always been, like, I've kind of been forced to be, like, you're either white or Black. I never get to just be, like, me. And, like, biracial stuff has, like, its own nuance and it's all fucked up. And, like, also my own fucked up stuff. But, like... So you're just, like, presenting yourself against an unattainable ideal. I don't know. I just feel like I've always been striving towards something of the Black excellence thing, which is also stupid because you should be allowed to be Black mediocre and, like, Black shit as well. Like, you're allowed to experience the whole spectrum of emotion. But yeah, it's not Black people treating me like shit. Like, anytime I've been in, like, Black spaces, like, they've been nothing but, like, gracious and, like, warm to me, and it's always, like, a very healing experience, but, like, you only get that in small doses, and I don't know, I always leave those spaces feeling a mix of, like, really, like, great pleasure and happiness for getting to experience it, but then also being like, I didn't present myself as Black enough in this space or whatever. I think the thesis of it is that, like, you grow up and you're supposed to strive towards whiteness, and when you realize that that's not what you want, and then you try to strive towards being a part of a community, you've been displaced from that community for so long that, like, when you get to participate in it, there's always this weird voice in the back of your head about it. I'm not Indigenous, so I can't speak to that, but I feel like that is also a big thing in Indigenous communities as well, because so much of their culture was just, like, stripped away from them. Yep. So yeah, it's just, like, white people stealing from you. Like, they steal your joy as well as your land and everything else. Yeah.
Myself as South Asian, like, I have my own privileges as like, quote unquote model minority, right? Because and because it goes into each of these different areas, it's up to the rest of us to speak up and do our part, whether it's donating, speaking to our families, which is not easy, but like Christina mentioned, like, having the ability to have those conversations is important, because that's how it filters out into the rest of the world and the day-to-day, right?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have high hopes when I was speaking to my parents, and it turns out yeah, they were totally supportive, which is very different. I remember having conversations with my dad before about how, you know, Black folk have a hard time even just getting a job simply by seeing a name on a resume, and if it sounds a little Black. And I have been stereotyped growing up because people think that I have a Black name, right? And I remember so many reactions when people were like, I thought you were Black when I first saw your name on the chart. Wow. It's like they say it with a sense of relief, like, thank God you're not Black. Wow. You just have a Black name, but like, that's okay. And then,
in fact, that makes you cooler.
Yes.
Because you're not Black, but you have a Black name. So you're like, you're kind of Black, but you're not.
Exactly.
So that makes it better.
Edgy. Wow. It's like a white guy with dreads. Like, wow, you must be so edgy.
Oh my God.
I can't.
And yeah, I remember talking to Dad about it, about systemic oppression, and Dad's like, well, if there's more crime, there's simply going to be more arrests and more police in the area. And it's hard. I know in Asian culture especially, respecting authority or whatever is seen as authority, whether it's elders or people in power, it's such a big thing. So for him to be like, oh wow, yeah, the cops are fucked up, it's a huge step for him. And now we're getting to the point where I'm trying to explain what defunding the police means to him, you know? So we're at that point. Yeah,
that's good.
But he watched 13th. I kept reminding them, I'm like, have you watched 13th yet? And he was shocked. And he messaged us. He used so many exclamation marks in that message.
Police have hurt more people than they have ever saved them. Police don't save people. It's not even part of their fucking job. I don't think they know what their job is.
Honestly.
That's actually true. I wanted to jump off of that because the argument can also be made that defunding the police, keep in mind, isn't necessarily taking away more jobs. We already have a plethora of uniformed men and women on the force, but we ask police to do things that they should not be doing anyway, like mental health checks, things like events, or, you know, taking care of providing security for events, or healthcare workers, or things like that. Like, these things there are designated roles for. And so in actuality, defunding the police is also helping them, because you're actually giving them time to do what their actual job description entails, so that they can actually put their resources and time towards cases that need their attention, versus sending them to mental health checks that they're not equipped for, they're not trained for, and having other people step up into the light and giving them the funding that they need in order to do their jobs and take care of the people that need it.
Yep. It's just that simple. And I just want to reassure those that are starting to have difficult conversations with the people in their circle, like, it can change. There's hope. Don't think that they can't change. That's what stops progress.
And that's a good point, like, in terms of shows, like, if it's hard having those conversations, because some people might not be equipped with the information or can speak to everything that's going on. So documentaries like 13 opens their eyes in a different way that you might not be able to kind of speak to, but it's still doing something, and it's giving money back to people who deserve it.
The more that we can put money into it, the more we can just fucking tell boring stories. Like, which is, well, like, I don't know, white people get to have every fucking spectrum of whatever. Like, they have rom-coms, they have dramas, they have everything, and Black people are reduced to trying to educate other people about their life experiences. But if you could just, like, pick up a book by a Black person and it's about something that's mundane, like, we need to have that ability too, and that structural change needs to happen as well, because I am personally not going to be making work that's educating other people. I want to just write, like, some smut or something and be done with it.
And have that be accepted, because I feel like if there is something that's just Black that comes out, again, there's this pressure that, like, if it's not really good, then this shouldn't keep happening.
It has to excel no matter what.
Yeah.
And we can't have shitty late night black comedies that are just about partying and black frat houses and hazing and
yeah.
I'm thinking of like the early 90s too, and how like we grew up in a point where there was at least like 2 years where we got to see representation of at least one of every culture in TV shows, and then they took that away from us. And like so like because like there was so much
Magic School Bus. What happened?
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, I'm not religious, but the fact that white people think Jesus was white is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they
Wild.
like idolize him and stuff like that. Like you're not idolizing a white person.
If y'all
Just
are
so you
reading
know.
from the same book, I'm pretty sure the mention of Jerusalem is in there. And if you look at an atlas,
Oh shit! I
it's
never
not in
thought
Ohio.
about that.
It's not in Dakota. It's not in North Carolina.
They take everything and make it white, and then make us believe that it was always white. But
Y'all,
that is not the case.
is Santa black?
Well, I did just have that thought.
Can we talk about queerness in black culture as well? We should
Sure.
address.
I just watched, my friend is hosting like gay movie nights, and we watched Rafiki, and Rafiki was banned in Kenya because they were like showing two women together is so explicit, blah blah blah, and they had to take that to the Supreme Court. And I remember we saw it, and they won, so because like they weren't allowing them to show the film in Kenya because they were like, it's too explicit. There's not even any sex in it. They just kiss. In these Caribbean countries, indigenous communities, like they already had a way to experience gender and sexuality, and then missionaries came and they like took their culture and like they forced Christianity onto them and like this idea of purity and stuff. And so much of like homophobia that happens in like these Caribbean countries, and especially like in places like Jamaica, like it comes from white people putting like this idea of purity on these cultures when these cultures had their own terms for people who are trans, and they had like their own ways of like having romantic relationships with the same gender and everything. So, like, that's how, like, deep-seated white supremacy is. Like, it's in everything. It's in, like, how you can control your body or, like, I don't know. It, like, makes me crazy how we elevate whiteness and everything, and so much about whiteness is so, like, evil and wrong.
Homophobia in the black community is still a thing. Yeah, even within my family, it's like, it's so difficult to hear just, or like see the way they react to things. A lot of the times they are homophobic. So if you're queer in those spaces with your own family, that's such a hard thing to deal with on top of your blackness. And you're at more risk, especially if you're a black trans person. You're just in so much more danger, and you're dealing with that on top of everything else and trying to deal with your family not accepting who you are.
It's not just that they're not physically safe, but mentally there's no safe place for them to be. And anybody that has to live a life like that, well, that's why suicide rates are so high, is simply because you can't.
Also, like, as someone who's, like, queer and non-binary trans, like, queerness as it is now would not be able to exist without black trans women. And so many fucking white gays think that, A, they're oppressed because they're white and gay, but they're also just cis men who have the highest privilege of anyone. And, like, you would not be able to go out and go fuck in a bathroom or any of the shit that you want to do, have your pride parade with your absolute rainbow vodka, if it wasn't for black trans women. They can go outside, and yes, they're at risk of being assaulted or murdered, but not at the same rate. And just like what black trans people and Black queer people have to go to is like incomparable. Like, you are hated not only for being if you're not being hated for being a Black person, you're hated for being queer, or you're hated for being trans, and you're told that you're not right and that you're an aberration. And like, I don't know, no one should have to live like that. Like, I can go online and I can see that, like, back to back 3 Black trans women have been murdered. And no one's elevating their voices as much as anyone else, and it's not an oppression game. I'm not, like, asking for people to have the same time being mourned as anyone else, because I don't want to continue mourning Black life, but, like, I don't know, like, until, like, we can't say Black Lives Matter if we don't care about Black trans lives.
Yep.
And like, Black trans lives have to be priority, especially when we're always rallying for black men, Black cis men, and the same doesn't happen for Black trans people, such as Tony McDade, who was a Black trans man who was murdered by police and hasn't been spoken about as much as, like, George Floyd.
When we talk about how the budget, how the money is allocated towards white capitalism, it, like, just within our province alone, right? And within our city alone, when we elected our premier, who is absolutely racist. And before any of this pandemic stuff, he was very much determined to slash all budgets towards community resources. But some statistics for you if you're Toronto. More than 25% of Toronto taxpayer dollars go to police services, which is $1 billion. $127 million of those dollars includes police services, police board, and police parking. Wow. The TTC itself gets less than $800 million, and the biggest contributor to poverty is transportation and lack of accessible transportation. It stops people from getting jobs, stops people from having access, and in a city where it is unlivable for anybody that is low income, gentrification and pushing people further and further from city center and making it inaccessible for them to get into the city, that's racism. Yep. Plain and simple.
Especially since they're expanding to Vaughan, where they probably don't need to expand to.
Yeah, everyone there fucking drives. Like, everyone.
Yeah.
They're so fine. Rich there. They're like the rich Italians. They don't need anything. They don't need any more help than they've gotten.
The money that is going to the TTC, they're paying these fucking fare inspectors to find people who cannot afford to take transit, but need, like, that's a necessity. Like, they need to get from point A to point B. They hire these fucking inspectors to, like, to use their power and to make them feel like they're so important that they can abuse their power.
Yes.
Yeah. And
whip
they're,
their
like,
dicks out.
Fighting people. Yeah, they're fighting people on the TTC. They're finding people. There's so many other things you could be doing than hurting these people. Yeah, with that money. And it's just...
Transit should be free. Like, they released that study that was like, if everyone who owns a house paid $1, we could have free transit. I'm like, why the fuck is that not happening then? Like, it's exactly. Like all the hoops you have to fucking jump through. It's like, this would cost $1, but we're not gonna do it though. Like, we're gonna just, like, say you can do it, but we're like, no one's gonna do that.
That's why when you have people are like, okay, so what? So I support Black lives, but everything that you're saying is idealistic. It's not fucking idealistic. Mm-hmm. It's misplaced money, bitch. You're spending, those people that have the power are putting the money in their pockets. They're not spending it towards things that the people really need. And yeah, we're not asking for much.
These are possible things. Like, these are things that can happen.
Yep.
And this is what we're fighting for. We're not fighting for an impossible dream.
Yeah.
This is achievable.
Yep.
And it needs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're making us feel like it's not something that we should be asking for, and it's not something that's possible.
Yes. Yes.
Like, we're dumb for even thinking that it could be any different.
Yes. And that blows me away that, I don't know, people, it's a lot of misplaced moral judgment. This is what I mean by community as much. Just seeing these protests alone and seeing how much we've achieved as a community without the police help, thank you very much, is proof that, look, we can do it. When we come together, we are strong enough. We don't have useless murders happening when we come together. Oh, I wonder why.
Especially as Canadians, it's important for us to educate ourselves on the RCMP and their role in this too, because I feel like they get forgotten about, besides obviously Indigenous people who are directly affected by them every day, but like, we're very focused on just general cops, but the RCMP is like a whole other thing in Canada that needs to be taken care of.
Yep. And I see a lot of great things happening in the US in terms of politicians actually paying attention and policies being changed, but I don't see anything happening in Canada. And I think that we need to continue this fight and keep speaking up. And, you know, Americans, if y'all are listening, you need to speak up for us too, because
it's a global issue.
Yeah.
No, guys.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau kneeled. Even though
Oh
he's
my
not
god.
Yeah.
Come on.
Thanks, Trudeau. You're really making a difference for
Thank
us.
You
you
can
so
go
much.
kneel off a cliff.
He like represents Canada so well, I feel, because on the outside people are like, oh, this guy is like a young, good-looking prime minister, and he's so nice, and you know, he's such a good guy. But that's like, that represents Canada to me.
Yeah,
because
it's the
everyone
essence.
thinks we're this peaceful, beautiful country where we're all about love and acceptance and multiculturalism.
We're untouchable.
But if you
We don't have
but if you
drinking
look
water.
deeper,
For Indigenous people, like, Indigenous people
Yeah.
here don't have drinking water. We try to go through their land to build pipes that ruin the land that we have to live on too, also. Everything that's, like, environmentally damaged is placed where there are Black communities or there are Indigenous communities. Well, we had Japanese internment camps, we had residential schools, like, Canada has done it all. I'm pretty sure OCAD is, like, where they either lynched slaves or they sold slaves or did both. Like, that's just McCall Street. That's just downtown by the AGO. So, like, you can go check out an art museum and also be stepping on the bodies of dead Black people who, like, died so that area could exist. Like, I don't know, like, when did any of you guys, like, learn about this? Because, like, it wasn't in school for me, and, like, I had to, like, find out.
yeah, I learned about Africville, like, 3 weeks ago. I didn't fucking know about that shit.
Yep.
And I should. I'm fucking Black, and there's so much I don't know about my own culture and my own history because
It was
they've
robbed.
like
You're not taught.
Yeah.
You're not taught it.
they're just, it's so strategic too.
Yeah,
Like, they're purposefully not teaching us these things because they're trying to erase our history and just sell lies to us and just teach us only very specific things.
Yep.
So that we don't understand our power and we don't understand our own history.
Yep.
My mom's a teacher, and she tells me, like, the amount of stuff they don't teach anymore is crazy. And kids are the best people to teach this stuff to, because my I know someone's son, he just doesn't understand what's going on right now, because he's like, well, why do people not like Black people? Like, what's the issue? And it's like, that's how the kids start out, but if you're educating them in the wrong way, then that's how we end up with this society that keeps doing what it's doing.
There's an argument where they're like, oh, like, you have to let kids be kids, and you have to wait until they're older to understand this concept. It's like, no one gave Black children or Indigenous children the same courtesy. They're forced at a very young age to understand exactly how they fit in the grand scheme of the world. So no, you can teach your white children and everyone else about the same thing, because if Black kids and Indigenous kids are forced to understand and forced to grow up, and they'll understand it. They're not that stupid.
Yeah, children are so smart. Letitia asked, like, our youngest, like, moment of, like, experiencing racism, and, like, I didn't know this because I was in daycare, and who remembers being in daycare? My mom was like, well, you used to come home from daycare, and you'd be calling yourself the Ensler baby, which means that someone at daycare was calling me that, and that's why I was saying that at home. So that's how early it fucking starts. And then even, like, probably, like, when I was, like, 4, I went to, like, this kid's birthday party, and then his dad didn't want me to go to the birthday party, and I didn't understand why. It was because he didn't want, like, a Black kid in his house. So my mom had to, like, fight him verbally to let me go to this birthday party that I probably should have just gotten to go home from.
You were at a daycare, and another little child...
Either child or maybe one of the... Or adult. Yeah. Maybe it was one of the adults there that referred to me
Which
as
is,
that.
like, even worse. Even worse. Like, if you...
Both so fucked up.
Yeah,
so
I don't even...
Insanely fucked up.
Yeah.
This may seem overwhelming to people that are not Black or Indigenous about, I don't even know where to begin with all this, but just speaking up is enough to enact change, and it's about fucking time. Things are changing.
Mm-hmm. And even if you can't speak up and use your voice, you can still do silent things, petitions, donations, just educating yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean, if you're not ready to a certain degree, I can understand, but there are still other ways you can help support the cause. So it's not as if no one can do anything. Everyone has a part and a role to play in this, so there's no excuses.
One thing that you can do today, though, is to follow Old Growth Press on Instagram at instagram.com/oldgrowthpress. Thank you all for participating in this and contributing your voices to this podcast. And when you can, support Black creators. Not when... I'm sorry. Not when you can. Do it now. It's not hard. Support Black creators and speak up for Black and Indigenous folk. And that's all.
Do your part. Do your part.
Do your fucking part.